How is the ghost of Christmas present presented in Charles Dickens's novella A Christmas Carol? Let's find out. How's it going, Revision Squad? It is me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, and in this video we are going to have a quick think about how the ghost of Christmas present is depicted in Charles Dickens's novella A Christmas Carol. Now, despite the fact that this spirit only appears in 1/5 of the story, it is still an important figure, especially if you want to think about the themes of generosity, Christmas, the supernatural, change, and so on. As per usual, I will be analysing loads of key quotations in this video, so you might find it useful to grab a pen and some paper in case you feel like making notes. And of course, if you find this video to be useful, please do consider showing your support by dropping it a like, commenting, subscribing to my channel, and sharing this video with your friends, classmates, and maybe even your teacher too. Speaking of subscribers, at present over 60% of you watching my videos aren't subbed up, so if you're one of those people, please do click that lovely red subscribe button because it really does help me out loads. Before analysing the ghost of Christmas present, I would like to have a quick think about who or what they are. So, if you want to think about this spirit as just a character, you could say that the ghost of Christmas present is a jolly giant. It is the second of the 3 spirits that Scrooge is warned about, and it takes Scrooge to see the various sights of Christmas Day. But of course, we can think a bit more deeply than that, because we can think about the spirit's story role. By story role, I mean the character's broader purpose within the narrative. So how does Dickens use them to deliver messages, emphasise key ideas, or generally progress the plot? In response to that, I might say that by showing the universality of Christmas during the Victorian era, the spirit emphasises several of the story's key themes, including generosity and family and love. But here's the thing, right? We can think more deeply still, because we can consider the ghost of Christmas present as a symbol, metaphor, or representation for something or someone else. So, first of all, we could consider this spirit as being comparable to the Victorian version of Father Christmas. You see, back in the Victorian era, Father Christmas was seen as an emblem of good cheer, which, considering the spirit's jolliness and ability to make others happy, I think kind of applies here. Its attire too is also comparable to that of the Victorian Father Christmas. You see, back then, Father Christmas was often depicted wearing tan or green robes. And what colour robes does this spirit wear? Green. Now, I know you probably associate Father Christmas with the colour red, but that idea only became popular in the 1930s after a Coca-Cola advert. Now, if you're not so keen on that idea, why not view this spirit as a personification of Christmas Day? You could see its robes as being comparable to a Christmas tree, and the fact that the spirit ages and more or less dies when the day ends could be seen as the passing of Christmas Day. In my video about the ghost of Christmas past, I discussed how that spirit might be comparable to the Son or Jesus Christ. Continuing with that idea, we could see the ghost of Christmas present as the figure of the Father. It is shown to be incredibly powerful. It can seemingly be anywhere in the world it pleases, as seen in how it takes Scrooge all over the place to see the sights of Christmas. It is also presented as being all-knowing, given that it can see that Tiny Tim will die if things do not change. It seems to look after mankind, or at least make them more cheerful on Christmas Day, as seen by how it sprinkles a substance onto the dinners of the poor. And there is something quite paternal in the way that it shields ignorance and want. I know that this might seem like a bit of a jump, but given that this is a Victorian text and that Christianity was the main religion of Victorian England, I think that this is a plausible interpretation of this character. Anyway, if that's who the Ghost of Christmas Present is, which quotations might we discuss in order to analyse them? Alright, before we get started, here's your standard reminder that all of the page references I mention are for this book, Penguins, A Christmas Carol and Other Christmas Writings. If you have a different edition, your page numbers will probably be a bit different, but I hope I make it pretty clear whereabouts the quotations can be found so that you can keep up and find them easily too. So, our first quotation comes from the start of the stave, before Scrooge has even properly met the spirit. Scrooge opens a door, takes in the spirit's appearance, and the spirit says, "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in and know me better, man!" Simply put, I would suggest that this quotation presents the Ghost of Christmas Present as being jolly. The repetition of "come in" is authoritative, but in a friendly, bombastic way, and the exclamation marks and narration make it pretty clear that the spirit is expressing an intense, and in this case, positive emotion. By inviting Scrooge to come in and know me better, the spirit is behaving in a warm and friendly way, as it is seeking to form an amicable relationship with Scrooge. Now, this spirit is shown to be jolly throughout most of stave 3, but I won't be discussing any additional quotations with this idea in mind, simply because I think this quotation is nice and straightforward, and it's also probably the place where we first see the spirit being jolly. Okay, next up I would like to consider the lengthy description of the spirit's appearance, which comes almost immediately after the quotation we discussed just a couple of seconds ago. In describing the spirit, Dickens writes, "It was clothed in one simple deep green robe, bordered with white fur, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free, free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanour, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust." Now, there are loads of things that we could say about this description, so get ready to take some notes because this is going to be a whistle-stop tour. First of all, the spirit's green robes, crown of holly, and the icicles that adorn that crown indicate winter, or Christmas time more specifically. If you choose to analyse this, you could discuss how the spirit might represent the Victorian Father Christmas, or could be seen as Christmas Day personified. If you were to consider the spirit's genial face, cheery voice and joyful air, then you would be able to discuss how the Ghost of Christmas Present's jolliness has been reinforced by a semantic field of merry language. By picking up on the repetition of free and the adjectives open and unconstrained that are used in reference to the spirit, you could argue that Dickens has created a semantic field of freedom in his description of the spirit. Now, this contrasts nicely with the ghost of Jacob Marley, who is definitely anything but free. Could Dickens be suggesting here that good spirits, such as the Ghost of Christmas Present, lead an unrestricted existence, whereas bad spirits are chained and obstructed? The final detail that I think is worth having a look at is the detail now in bold. At the side of the spirit is an ancient rusted scabbard, which is the thing that holds a sword. However, it is empty. Because the spirit has no sword and seemingly hasn't done so for quite some time, given that the scabbard has been ravaged by rust, you could argue that the spirit is a peaceful entity because it has no need for weaponry. Alright, let's get back to some smaller quotations. As Scrooge and the spirit roam the streets of London, Dickens writes, "The sight of these poor revellers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he sprinkled incense on their dinners from his torch." This quotation shows the spirit to be both generous and sympathetic to the less fortunate. It clearly keeps an eye out for the poor, as shown by how seeing them interests the spirit very much, knowing that Christmas time might be a bit more difficult for them, and liberally spreads Christmas cheer to them. This of course contrasts greatly with Scrooge's typical behaviour, and so the spirit is providing a good role model for him to follow. The spirit's sympathy towards the poor is seen elsewhere, as it tells Scrooge that it provides cheer to a poor dinner most, which further shows how it is understanding of the plights of the less fortunate. And if you really want more convincing that the spirit is generous and sympathetic, well, this quotation outright states that it is. Now, I usually suggest that analysing a quotation like this isn't really all that useful, as you might just end up saying that the spirit is shown to be generous or sympathetic because the quotation literally says so. You can't do much in the way of deep language analysis here. However, you could, if you really wanted, make a claim that because the narration explicitly states that the spirit is generous and has sympathy with all poor men, that these qualities must be really clear to see in the spirit's behaviour, so much so that you cannot avoid them. However, the Ghost of Christmas Present is not just one-dimensional and super nice. You see, it is shown to be able to turn nasty. Really quite nasty, in fact. You see, when discussing Tiny Tim with Scrooge, the spirit says, "If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population." Now, the spirit is not actually advocating Tiny Tim's death. Instead, it is reusing Scrooge's words to, perhaps somewhat harshly, highlight just how awful the miser's views are. Think about it this way. Scrooge's heart is just starting to open up, which is obviously incredibly rare for him, and the spirit asserts that the person most responsible for this change in Scrooge should die. That's not exactly pleasant, but I think it gets the point across. Scrooge's views are deplorable. The spirit turning nasty when trying to teach Scrooge a lesson is of course seen elsewhere, when it suggests that Scrooge may be worthless and less fit to live than Tiny Tim is. In turning nasty, the spirit is trying to show Scrooge how his vast wealth does not give his life value or meaning. So in both those examples, the spirit's nastiness comes as it tries to teach Scrooge a lesson. It is not pointlessly horrible, but instead uses these attacks as a means of pushing Scrooge's behaviour in a more positive direction. That's an interesting choice, and not one I necessarily agree with, but it seems to have the desired effect on Scrooge. If you would like more analysis of those two quotations that are on your screen right now, then please do watch my video that analyses Scrooge in Stave 3, as I consider them from a Scrooge-centric angle in that video. Okay, so that is the analysis of those quotations over, but how could we summarise the Ghost of Christmas Present in just a couple of sentences? Well, we could say, a jolly giant, the Ghost of Christmas Present is presented as being incredibly generous and sympathetic, especially towards the poor, perhaps acting as a role model for Scrooge to follow. Although generally really positive, Scrooge's selfishness and greed appear to anger the spirit immensely. Now, this brief summary could be used as an introductory paragraph or overview for an essay that focuses specifically on the Ghost of Christmas Present. Some of the descriptive words in that mini paragraph, so words like generous, sympathetic, role model, positive, or maybe even anger, could be used as starting points for analytical paragraphs too. So why not copy down the summary and see it as a sort of cheat sheet or shortcut to producing some top quality analysis for this character. And finally, just before the video ends, I thought I would leave you with a quick question to reflect on. So, why might it be argued that the Ghost of Christmas Present is Scrooge's foil, which is a literary term meaning a character who contrasts with another, usually the main character, in order to highlight certain aspects of them? Now, I'll be honest, I'm quite proud of this question, as I think it invites you all to think about the Ghost of Christmas Present in a deep way, not just as a character, but a literary tool that is being used to deliver certain messages or ideas. Now, you could use this question to prompt a mind map, or you could use it to prompt some discussion with your friends and classmates if you are revising together, or you could even use it as a title for an essay. If you want to pop some ideas that you have in response to this question down in the comments section, that would always be wonderful too. I always really enjoy seeing what you come up with, and I'm usually pretty good at responding as well. So you know what? You'll even get some feedback from me. Okay, there we go. That is my analysis of the Ghost of Christmas Present complete. I really do hope that this video has helped you out, one way or the other. Whether you're revising, studying the story for the first time, or you've got a passing interest in Charles Dickens's writing. Of course, if you want to show your support, please do like, comment, subscribe and share. And if you are really appreciative, I do also have a Patreon too, a link for which is in the video description. Anyway, as ever, I hope that you have an awesome rest of the day. If you are revising, please do remember to take frequent short breaks, as a burned out student is not a happy or successful student, which is what I think you deserve to be. So the Ghost of Christmas Present is exactly that, a gift. It is kind, generous and incredibly sympathetic. However, just like one too many Brussels sprouts on Christmas Day, it is more than capable of turning nasty.